Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health here in Anchorage. Thanks to Alaska Public Media for allowing us to bring you hangar flying. This evening, we are pleased to have Matt Freeman on our show. Matt is an airport project engineer with the Federal Aviation Administration's Airports Division here in Anchorage. Welcome to Hangar Flying, Matt.
Well, thank you, Mary. I'm glad to be here.
So we're going to be talking about one of the safety features that's available for pilots in Alaska. And what we do as pilots is have the ability to practice our takeoffs and landings on marked runways. And we can do this in a safe environment before we actually go out and conduct off-airport operations. Can you give us some background on how and why this runway marking project got started in Alaska?
Well, sure. Geez, it's been many years ago. I was actually working as a project manager up in Fairbanks and working with the Alaska State DOT. And while up there, Tom George continually advocated for some type of markings to create what we now call a practice gravel runway. And it was a tough nut to crack. It was trying to find some way to mark a runway without creating any collision hazard was challenging. On top of that, if you look at any airport that has federal funds, our office or nationally, we like everything standardized. So that's it's going to be a 60-foot wide runway, a 75-foot runway. And when we start placing markings on the runway, again, we're really very cautious about putting new markings on the runway. So it just kind of sat there until we actually had a construction project, or the state of Alaska had a construction project where we did half-width runway operations, and we were moving the runway, and we were using those traffic cones to indicate where the runway was. Well, it was tough to see them, and it really hit home when one time I was landing at one of those airports. I reviewed the safety plan, I knew where the runway was, and had a difficult time finding that landing surface. We actually, one of the project engineers up there came up with painting a runway center line on that runway, and that created the positive visual guidance. So we took that idea and then then I had to go back to headquarters, because you can't just put markings on runways without a modification to standard. And there we ended up getting a modification to standard for actually 6 airports, and we placed these markings, which are paint markings, paint on gravel, to create what looks like a practice gravel runway. So I think what happened is once we got that standard, the next thing is to work with an airport to agree to place the markings on the runways, and we went from there.
So who actually goes out and does the painting on the runways?
Well, that was actually another story in itself. But the first airport that actually said, yes, we're going to do this, was Fairbanks International Airport. And it was the users group, a culmination of several of the users and the organizations up there that got together and developed a process for creating templates to mark these 2-foot by 4-foot stripes that were placed at certain intervals. And it was really a combination of coordinating with the airport owner, because you can't just go on an airport and
Sure.
start marking. There needs to be a process and coordination, NOTAMs placed in order to do that work. So it was the airport operations. They provided some folks, and then a volunteer group. They got out and they actually go out typically once in the spring and once in the fall, mark the runways, and then go out and have a party afterwards.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Plus, it's a really good safety intervention, so that's great. What distances are marked?
Well, the markings are placed at the runway threshold, of course, as they're 2 foot wide by 4 feet long, and we place 3 of them on at the threshold, and then subsequently every 100 feet there's an additional two markings left and right for typically 600 feet.
Okay.
And those markings are placed they're placed 25 feet from outside to outside, and that creates the prism or the rectangle for the 25 foot wide by maybe 600 foot long runway.
That's great. So you're giving pilots width as well as length challenges. So that's a great idea. Matt, we're going to have to wrap this up. Thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to having you back on the show and learning more about the marked runways.
That'll be great. Thank you, Mary. It's good to be here.
Thanks, Matt. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, thank you for watching Hangar Flying.